Hello and welcome to the Financial Wellness Hour. I am your host, Hirsch, Serman, and I'm thrilled to have you here with me on WGSN-DB, the Going Solo Network. This show is for those who are wanting to learn more about creating financial wellness, and we're going to take different life cycles. We're going to explore them financially and emotionally, because your finances are more about the emotions than the money itself. Although we may be fairly general in our discussion, we would love to hear from you to make it more relevant, to make it more personal for you. So please do call in. You can reach me through my website, lifecycle.financial. That's lifecycle.financial. Or you can post your comments, your questions, or anything else on Facebook or YouTube or any of the platforms you might be listening to us. So in a time when it seems like you have lost all control and maybe unfortunately feel like you've even lost all hope, it's always nice to hear that you do have the ability to take back control and to find your voice again. And finding your voice is a big thing, because sometimes that might be something that you haven't had in a while, or if you have, it's really soft. Going through a divorce is difficult, and to know that how your divorce plays out is your responsibility can be quite daunting. So it is empowering to know that you can even the playing field and get your power back and get your voice back. There are several approaches to go through divorce. You can sit around a kitchen table, do the negotiation that way. There are people that go to court. But I think possibly the most common approach is mediation. It puts power back in your hands. It allows you to take more control of your divorce journey, which is always a good thing. It also helps you to take control of other aspects of your life as well. Our guest today is Jen Mitchell. She is the founder of Solace Divorce Mediation. And together we're going to explore how to create a win-win mediation. I can tell you also, having gotten to know Jen over the last probably couple years now, I can tell you she brings more than just expertise in mediation. She can help you to infuse other wonderful insights and perspectives into your life. Jen, thank you so much for joining us again.
Oh, Hirsch, thank you so much for having me and for that beautiful welcome and intro.
All
So
true.
great to be here.
It is all true. I can tell you that. I am going to ask you to share a little bit about your background so people understand a little bit of your background, where that passion comes from, if you would.
Okay, so yeah, I've been a family law attorney for the last 17 years in the state of Illinois. And the first 9 years, I served as a litigation attorney. So I was a zealous advocate for my client in the courtroom, representing his or her best interest. And then I had 3 kids in 39 months, and they made me realize that my role in that system that I do believe is broken was destroying other people's children, families, people, the world. And so I at that point, I was like, there has to be a better way to do this. And so my passion and my drive for the work that I do really comes from wanting to shift it from that broken system that does, I believe, destroy people or block them from living their full potential in their life, to creating a new way to do it, where we can help guide couples and people and help shift the way that people are looking at divorce, and hopefully have that transcend to other dark times in their life, because it's in those dark times that we're given the greatest opportunities to grow. And so that is my passion project. That is what I'm doing with Solace. That is what I love.
Well, you're doing it. I can tell you we have had common clients, and you are certainly making a
Yes.
positive impact. So that's a good thing. They speak very highly of you.
Thank you, and vice versa.
Thank you. In my experience, I found that people don't always understand the process and often the terms that are used. For example, you said I'm a litigation attorney, right?
Mhm.
People kind of have heard the word, but they don't really know what all of this means. So I'm going to ask, can you talk a little bit, or maybe share, like, what is mediation and what is litigation?
Yes. Okay. So there are two different approaches of reaching the same result. So
Okay.
when people, in the state of Illinois, it just takes one person to want to get a divorce. If one person wants to get a divorce, the couple will divorce. The other person doesn't have a choice. They have a choice of how difficult they want to make it. And this is their main choice. Are we going to litigate or are we going to mediate? And so when you're litigating, that is kind of, unfortunately, the traditional way of doing this, where people, and I think people have just been programmed from generations, passed upon generations. I need to get an attorney. I need to go to court. I need to get what I deserve. And so that's really litigation. It's where, both people hire attorneys, and that attorney's job is to be that zealous advocate. And so when I played that role, I was ethically obligated to only look out for my client's best interest. And that's what happens when you litigate. You have an attorney. That attorney is doing all the talking for you. You are not able to speak when you are in that courtroom setting. The only time that you can speak is if you are in a hearing, which is about $10,000 to get there. So really, you're giving your voice away to your attorney who's doing the advocating for you. And then you have the judge, that random stranger wearing a robe, sitting elevated at the front of the courtroom. And that person who, if there are children involved, that person who has never met your children, who has never worked one day in your marriage for any of the things, that you've accumulated in the form of marital property, that person is making those decisions for you regarding parenting time, when you're going to see your children, how you're going to share holidays with your children, and, all the other parenting decisions and all the other parts of that parenting agreement. But then your marital property division, that judge is making all of those decisions for you. So that is litigation. That is really, you are stripped of your power, you are stripped of your voice, and you are giving everything over to your attorneys and the judge. And then you have mediation, which is totally different from that litigation setting. That litigation, the beauty of talking about that, Hirsch, is everyone knows someone who has used that court system to get a divorce. And so everyone knows, the destruction that happens in there. And it's financially destructive, it's emotionally destructive, it's physically destructive. It's all of these very, very difficult things. Mediation is totally opposite. It isn't all of those destructive things. It can be absolutely amazing. But the hardest part of mediation is you have to talk to one another. And that is the difference. In the courtroom setting, you don't have to talk to one another because your attorneys are doing everything for you, and you can almost hide behind them as a shield. I didn't know they were going to say that. I didn't know they were going to write that. But in mediation, you have to talk to each other. And so mediation is making the choice to work together to create all of the agreements that you need to create for that, if there are children, that parenting agreement, and then the two of you working out, how are we going to divide this marital property, that we have worked so hard to accumulate. So those are the two main ways to do it.
So, and just a couple things on that. I'm going to add a little, but also kind of elaborate a little, I think. One of them is, and I say this all the time, emotions are often the most expensive part of a divorce. And I think litigation often, it fosters distrust and animosity and all the things that you were talking about, which heightens your emotions, which comes with a price tag, right? That's one piece. The other one that I've run into a few times is people say, oh, we'll just, we'll discuss everything around a kitchen table, and then we together will go to an attorney to draw up the papers. And in general, unless it's collaborative, but in general, an attorney only represents one person, right?
Yes.
And so that's something else that people do need to keep in mind. When you have somebody who's a mediator, and we're going to get into this, there's neutrality as opposed to sides being taken. And, so I do want to talk a little bit about that if we can, because I think this is something that actually surprises a lot of people. And I can tell you, I was certainly surprised. I went through 40 hours of mediation training, like you did.
Yeah.
And I was blown away at what the role of the mediator was. I had no idea, quite honestly. Going in and coming out was a whole different perspective. So can you share a little bit more on what that role is of the mediator?
Yes. So the role of the mediator, even though, so in my case, right, I still am an attorney. I still do my CLEs. I still keep up on everything. But as a mediator, when I play this part, I get to serve as the neutral, like you said. I get to serve as the guide. My focus, when I was that litigation attorney, I was focused on one person's best interest as if they were an island of one, when the reality is they're oftentimes a part of a family with an extended family circle of friends. And so as a mediator, it's a really beautiful place to be, for me at least. You probably feel this way too, Hirsch, because you're a loving, beautiful person too. But yeah, I just get to be a neutral guide. So I'm not there to make any decisions for them. I think a lot of time people come in and they feel they have to like prove their point to me. And I'm constantly managing expectations. Like, I'm not here to decide this for you. This is your journey. This is
Right.
your family. This is your stuff. And I'm here to guide you. So that's what I do. In every state, there's a different governing law.
Right.
And so I just guide them through all of the different conversations that they need. I am grateful for that 9 years of courtroom experience, because I feel like I have very creative ways to resolve things, and I can always parallel to the courtroom setting and give them the very harsh truth of, look, if you don't figure it
You
out
don't figure this
here,
out.
yes, if you don't figure it out here, you have to go there, and this is what happens in there. So yeah, the role is very neutral, I'm guiding. I give to my clients, I'm a coach, so I give a lot of love and support and tools and resources to them to help them grow.
And what you said, I'm so glad you did, because that was the part that blew me away. I was like, wait, what do you mean we're not supposed to, as a mediator, like, here are the 6 ways that you can split your ass? So like, as a CPA, I'm like, I'm a solutions guy. I want to figure it out, right? And I'm like, this is a whole different role, right? As you said, you're a guide. You're facilitating a healthy conversation. You're reality testing as to, you say you want 70% custody of the kids, but you travel 50% of the time.
Yeah.
Is that going to work, right?
Yeah.
You bring the reality and encourage that healthy conversation, which is a wonderful thing, especially because sometimes these people have not had, or maybe don't have the tools in understanding how to have a healthy conversation. So having somebody there who can guide you in that way is such a different experience to what I think, as you said, if you end up in the courtroom, it's just such a different experience for everybody. So
yes, it sure is. Destructive.
Yeah, and as you said, from an attorney perspective, representing somebody, you don't always look at the other side and what happens based on how fiercely you fight. And that's the other thing that a mediator is kind of keeping in mind, as to being neutral and helping them discuss things in a healthy way, which doesn't always happen in other settings. So I think those are wonderful things that happen.
Absolutely.
So this might be a little redundant at this point with our discussion that we've just had, but why is it such a popular method of going through a divorce? Because realistically, and I'm just going to name them. We're not going to explain all of them, but you can sit around a kitchen table. You can go to collaborative. You can go to an arbitrator. You can go to court. You can go to mediation.
Yes.
So why this one?
I think, I've seen a major shift happening, and I'm hoping, I know you and I have talked about this before, Hirsch, but I am hoping that this shift happens even more and faster. But I think that mediation is becoming more appealing to people. This could be a hours and hours long conversation. I will not make it that way, Hirsch. But I think COVID has been a great accelerant. That is a truth that I've seen in people. Prior to COVID, there were a lot, when I was doing consultations with people, it seemed like I was almost trying to convince them, this really is real. It's not a
Yeah.
free for all. It's a legal process. This is a legal process. We have the governing law in the state of Illinois. We have the Illinois Supreme Court. We have rules. We have to go to court one time. The judge has to approve your documents. There's a checks and balance system. But I felt like before COVID, there was a lot of this kind of explaining, like, no, this is legit. You can truly do this. It can truly take 2 to 4 months. It is a fraction of the cost. Like, you can really do this. I feel like with COVID, there's been a shift where now in my consults with people, I think people have been, stretched a little thin with their stress level, with their finances. I think people, you're probably seeing it. A lot of people are leaving their jobs, leaving, their homes, they're moving different places,
Yeah.
deciding to get a divorce. They're making these very big life changes. And the shift that I'm seeing is that people want to be in control more now. Whereas before it was I had to try to convince them this is a total amazing way to do this. Now I'm feeling people are like, we want to do this. We want to be in control of it. We don't want to spend years in the courtroom. We don't want to spend tens of thousands. We don't want to fight with each other. That's what I'm hearing more and more and more. We don't want to fight with each other. We just don't want to be married anymore. And we want a guide. We don't know how to do this. And, when you say people doing it in the kitchen table, I get that, absolutely. I have so many people that I talk to that say, oh, we figured everything out. We just need someone to look it over and
Right.
help us, e-file. And it's like, there's no way unless, that's the unfortunate truth. Unless you are an expert in this field or someone who has a very firm understanding of what is required to get a divorce because it is a legal process, there is you can do it. It's just going to take a very long time. And why do that? So I think,
I
again,
agree.
circling back, that's why I think mediation is becoming so much more popular now, because you do have a guide. You have someone, it's not you going into it being like, oh my gosh, now we have to figure all this out. Like if I was
Right.
going to build a house, I wouldn't try to figure out how to build a house. I would hire someone who knows how to build a house, So it eliminates that stress and that overwhelm for people when they have a guide, someone who knows what they're doing, someone who can walk them through the whole process. The time, the amount of time it takes to get a divorce is truly, at Solace, we're getting people divorced in 2 to 4 months from the first time that we meet with them to the one and only court date. And that's extraordinary because,
That is.
as you know, and I know, when you're going through divorce, it's like you're in that cocoon, that divorce cocoon, the goo, you're not that old caterpillar, your
Yeah.
old life, or the butterfly, and it's uncomfortable. So why, and I think that's the shift that people are having. Why are we going to stay here, this gross space that's really uncomfortable, or make it even worse by going to the courtroom setting? Let's just do it ourselves. So
And
that's what I'm thinking.
You had said earlier that the traditional way, old school, if I can call it that, was going to court. And I think a lot of people still think that, oh, am I going to have to go to court? I don't want to have to go to court, right?
Mm-hmm.
Well, the statistics are that maybe 1 in 20 cases go to court at this point. So we definitely have seen a shift in that alone, which is wonderful. I agree.
It's
100%.
beautiful.
And again, everybody has to go to court because the judge ultimately has to sign off on it because it's a legal procedure, as you said. Yes, if you want to decide that I'm going to get the bedroom and you're going to get the dining room set, that's cool. Do that around your kitchen table. It can be a very difficult thing to really go through everything. When you're talking about pension plans, and you're talking about how do I avoid the tax triggers? How do I, ultimately do this in the right way? I literally have had people tell me they went, they filed, they did all the things. And she came back to me, she called me 3 months later and said, Hirsch, I thought I was divorced. I'm not. Because they didn't do it right. So sometimes you do just need that expert to help you get through, even if it's 50% of it and you can do the groundwork, that's fine. But really having a professional, as you said, I'm not going to build a house on my own. It's, there's some really great YouTube videos, building a house, not what I would.
Well, and you bring up a great point too, because, as a mediator, my wheelhouse is, the governing law, the Illinois Supreme Court, the process that needs to be done. But you bring up a really good point about the taxes and stuff. And I do want to give you the kudos there and share, with your audience that, your mediator, as a family law mediator, that is my wheelhouse, and it
Right.
is truly, what I love about mediation, and I love, 1 out of 20 cases, is that it is empowering people. It is people taking control of their life. But in that, it is, I always coach my clients when there's complicated financials or they have questions. It's like, well, I have a referral for you, go to an expert for that. And that's another aspect of mediation is you can go to the mediation for the family law, but then have other experts that you can use so you feel comfortable because it is your own individual journey, when you're going through the divorce. So, and you've done an amazing job with my clients in helping them understand those tax implications.
The last thing that you want is to agree with your spouse. It's obviously there's reasons you're getting divorced, and then you don't do it right.
Correct.
That creates stress. I mean, just
Yeah.
one quick example is somebody said, oh, my spouse is going to keep the house. She's going to refinance in 60 days. I'm going to start maintenance right now. We've agreed to how much, even though it's not finalized. And I said to her, does she work? And he said, no, she's going to rely on my maintenance. And I said, you need to rewrite that portion of your MSA, of that settlement agreement, because no mortgage bank is going to give you 2 or 3 months worth of maintenance payments and refinance the house. They want 6 months, right?
Yeah,
so
they do.
those are the kind of nuances. I've had
Exactly.
situations where it turned ugly and the person wanted to force a sale in the end because the wife couldn't refinance in 60 days. So these are some of the nuances that the professional can guide you through and help you with.
Absolutely.
And set it up in a way that it's not confrontational or adversarial in any way. It's just, this is how we have to do it so that we can give you guys what you've agreed to. So,
yes.
And we do have to take a break. We are running a little bit long, but this has been amazing. We'll recap when we get back, but we will be back in about 2 minutes. Stay with us.
Okay.
Hello and welcome back to the Financial Wellness Hour. Our guest today is Jen Mitchell. She is the founder of Solace Divorce Mediation, and I am loving what I'm hearing. I must be honest. This is the Financial Wellness Hour, as I said, on WGSN-DB, the Going Solo Network. And I do want to recap some of the things that we've covered because I think some of them are so important and often missed or not fully understood. And sometimes, as I said, it's the devil's in the details. So we did speak a little bit about what is mediation, what is litigation. We mentioned 4 or 5 other, I don't even remember exactly, but it's several other approaches to going through a divorce, but kind of some of the pros and cons of each of these. We spoke about the role of the mediator and how that is so often misunderstood what their role is. And people have different styles. So when you, with any professional, not just a mediator, these are professionals that you are hiring to work with or for you. Make sure you're comfortable with their style and whomever they are. We spoke about responsibilities. It is your responsibility to take control of your divorce journey. It's not an easy thing to do always. So please, use the tools and the resources available for that. We spoke a little bit about taking back control, about finding your voice again, which sometimes has been very soft. But it is, if ever a time really to get into a healthy discussion and have that voice, now is the time. And we ended, which I think is a very important piece to it, is how do you kind of, on using professionals in a proper manner, I think is maybe the best way to sum that up. And one of the things you pointed out, which I think is so important, because it is important to use them appropriately, use each professional in their area of expertise. I'm a cold, heartless MBA CPA, right? I'm not a therapist. People do. I mean, and again, I'm going to be compassionate, and I am a compassionate person, but I don't have the skills to guide somebody as a trained therapist or a divorce coach. I know a lot about the law in the states that I've worked, but I am not an attorney. Use me for finances. Use Jen for the legal aspect. That becomes a much more impactful way to go through it. And quite honestly, it sounds a little counterintuitive sometimes. When you add professionals to your team, you actually get a better outcome at a cheaper cost, which is a wonderful thing as well. So, all right. So we've spoken about mediation. We've spoken about the power of getting your voice, being in control, the discussion, a little bit of that process, a little bit. We'll get back to it. How does somebody prepare for mediation?
Well, and I love that you're talking about someone's voice, because my process at Solace, it's, I'm a Virgo, so everything is very organized. And so, to get them prepared, we do an onboarding call before they start, their journey. And in that call, I help guide them of how they're going to be successful. What do you need to do to prepare? So obviously, to prepare from the legal side of things, and Hirsch, I know you're big into this, right? Is you need to put everything together. All of the marital property, you need to put that together, and that's coming straight from the Illinois Supreme Court. And something just real quick that you tapped into earlier about that, the emotions, that are the expensive part of divorce, it is so true. And when we're talking about, getting ready for the mediation, what do you need to do to prepare, get your financials together? There's no emotion in that. There's no, I think maybe I should do this, or, I think he may be hiding it. It's like, no, there's no emotions in legal. Disclose all your stuff. So that's the first thing that they need to do to prepare, is really get everything organized in the sense of getting everything down in an inventory. This is all of the marital property we have. And when we're talking about marital property, it's not just a home. That's one aspect. It can be real estate, a home, a condo, a summer home, whatever it might be, a cabin. But the other parts of it, the retirement plans, the checking accounts, the debts, the vehicles, any type of collections that they have, any stocks that they have, anything that they may have, they need to put it all together. So that's the first thing they need to do to prepare. At Solace, the soul of this practice is authenticity. And so that's why I love when you're talking about people speaking their voice, because that is truly the best way to prepare for mediation, in my opinion, is giving your own self that time to center yourself, taking really good care. If you're going through a divorce right now, take really good care of yourself and love yourself, because it is one of the most emotionally difficult experiences of your life. And giving yourself that grace and that time to think about, what your truth is before you start mediation. What is your truth? And in Illinois, that's where I'm an expert, right? For the parenting stuff, the statute says it needs to be in the best interest of the kids. And then for the marital property division, it needs to be fair and equitable. So making sure that each person, as they prepare for mediation, gets really centered in their truth of, what do I believe? And getting rid of all the noise. Like, Hirsch, there's so many people talking to you when you're going through a divorce, well, this is what my sister did, and this is what happened to my brother. It's like, okay, no, every case is different. Every family is different. Every child is different. Every marital property inventory is different. And so I don't care what happened in any other case. This is your journey. This is your path. This is your family. This is your stuff. So what do you, eliminating all of that noise, what do you believe to be in the best interest of your kids? And what do you believe to be fair and equitable? And more importantly, I coach my clients to come to the mediation process prepared to share why. Why is that what you believe to be in the best interest of your kids? And why is that what you believe to be fair and equitable? And usually that one comes from maybe the beginning of the marriage or before they were married, and that's where, you said the emotional part of it, and emotions do drive us. I mean, that's what get us to our wants. And by exposing those, then we can work together. Then we're like, okay, this is what's important to this person. This is what's important to that person. Let's reach a middle ground so we don't have to go to court and have a random stranger.
And I'll tell you something that I think is very difficult is when I've said to some of my clients at the beginning, what are your priorities? What do you want at the end of this? And they don't always know. And when you're negotiating for something. If you don't know what that something is, you may not be negotiating for the things that ultimately make you happy and are right for you or for your situation. I say this all the time, that you could be living next to somebody who got divorced in a similar home, drive similar cars, similar kind of family, and 100% different divorce. Everyone's is a personal journey, and what you want or need ultimately at the end of it may not be the same thing as that person next door did. And so one of the things I actually do is when I run through, I have an exercise and worksheet where we look at different aspects of people's lives and we kind of look at their priorities on that. And then we do the same for the spouse, not with the spouse, because I'm usually I play neutral much less than I play advocate. But that helps you identify what are the more difficult discussions going to occur, or what can you give up to get more of what you want, which you may not get all of. I just got to throw that out as well. So.
Oh, yes. I don't think anyone ever gets everything that they want, and that's as long as they can, exit the process. And my hope is always exiting their marriage with respect and love the same way they entered. But as long as they can leave the process and feel good with that end result, and be able to co-parent successfully and not hold on to any resentment or anger or as long as that happens, you're right on point. People, you're not going to get everything you want, because you're two different people. That's the other part. People are like, they just don't, I think they hone in so hard. Well, I can't believe that's what she wants, or that's what it's like, it has nothing to do with you. That is that's that person's belief system about money, about security, about finances. That has nothing to do with you. That is his or her individual truth. Stay in your lane with your truth, and let's reach an agreement that makes you both feel good, without feeling like you're being taken advantage of or disrespected, because that's not the intention. When people are, as I mean, you work with people in the financial part of divorce, Hirsch. So the fear that is present. It's a very difficult transition for people to make, from having two incomes to one. There's a lot of fear. There's a lot of uncertainty. So
and that's the other reason I think it's so important. I preach planning all the time. I think planning is enormous, and not just your priorities, but understanding. A lot of people, in a marriage, we kind of divide and conquer, if I can put it in a probably very male-oriented way. We tend to, I'll do these chores, you do those chores. One of them is the financial side of it. I still run across the vast majority of people, or marriages, should I say, only one person does the finances. That means often there's somebody who doesn't really know or understand who they are financially. And that becomes a big piece in your preparation. I've had people say to me, Hirsch, we've agreed on everything. He said to me, give me a number for maintenance, what used to be called alimony. And I said, I have no idea. I didn't want to overshoot and sound, like I'm being unreasonable, but I also didn't want to leave myself destitute. So understanding who you are, do a budget, right? It doesn't have to be to the penny. You'll never get it to the penny, quite honestly, but understand what is your essential spend? What is your discretionary spend? Now you know your range, what you can't go below, but where maybe your starting point is. These are some of the things in preparing that I think become so important that you've kind of hinted at, or some of them said directly, but really understanding what you're looking for and knowing what your truth is and what your needs are so, so important.
Yes.
And I think the other piece, it's linked to preparing, but it also goes through the process. You do need to, how do I want to put this? Check the mechanics of how it's done in your area. As you said earlier, different states have different rules. There are actually some states that say you cannot go to court until you've been to mediation at least once, right? That's very different to one that goes straight to court. But often, sometimes the attorney's there, sometimes the attorneys that are not there, depending on where you are. I think most of the states that I've worked in, the attorneys are not present. So I'm going to ask you to talk a little bit about, there could be the conception, especially if you're that person who's still finding their voice, like, excuse the phrasing, am I going to get screwed over because I need an attorney to advocate for me and to fight for what's mine, as opposed to walking in there and saying, there's no attorney to kind of be my advocate.
Yes, that happens. I have this conversation so many times, Hirsch, with people, because I do believe that is, again, just a generational belief system that has been passed down, where people, they have been kind of trained to believe that that's what they need in order to get exactly what they deserve. But, going back to something we talked about earlier, there is a governing law. In every state, there is a governing law. And that law is going to tell you every single thing that you need to talk about and that needs to be figured out in order to get a divorce. Because at the heart of everything we're talking about, divorce is a legal process. It is there are many different components to it, but it is a legal practice. So whether you're inside of court with a zealous advocate, advocating for you and representing you and fighting for your best interest, or you're outside of court utilizing mediation, there still is that one law. It's the same law that is present inside of court as it is outside of court. And then I kind of alluded earlier at the end of this, and you have spoken to this, you have to go to court in the state of Illinois. I don't know about all the other states.
Right.
Yet. But in the state of Illinois, you have to go to court. And I always coach my clients saying, look, it's just built into the family law court system. There's this checks and balance system, right, because it is the judge's due diligence at that hearing. And in Illinois, it's called the prove up hearing. It's the judge's due diligence to make sure that, first of all, your documents are in order, which that kitchen table, conversation, a lot of times that's a big part that isn't done correctly. But bigger than that, the judge is making sure that your agreements and your parenting agreement are in alignment with that governing law, that your agreements in the marital property, marital settlement agreement, dividing your marital property, that those are in alignment with the governing law, that you've done the homework of the Illinois Supreme Court, which is doing that financial disclosure and taking your co-parenting course. There's a checks and balance system, and the judge is given those documents a week before that prove up hearing to make sure that he or she has the time to review those documents. So that, I believe, is just, it's a false belief that you need to have an attorney. I do believe you need to be educated on the law.
Right.
I absolutely believe that, but you don't need a zealous advocate to educate you on that.
Yeah.
And at Solace, I have two client handbooks. I have an emotional client handbook and a legal client handbook, and they are intentionally separate because the emotional it is just as much an emotional experience as legal, when you're going through divorce. But as I shared before, there is no place for emotion when we're talking about legal stuff. Like it's not there, you hurt my feelings, so I should get this. It's like, no, that isn't part of this. You know what I mean? Yes,
Right.
could be part of your why. But really honoring those emotions and kind of recognizing these are two separate things. And if you're guided by a mediator who knows that law, you can educate yourself on that law. If you try to read it yourself, if a normal person tried to read it by themselves, it'd probably be overwhelming and difficult. But if you have an expert who understands it, who has been using it for years, it's not difficult to explain. It's not difficult to share, these are the provisions that apply in your case. And then you're empowered to make those decisions for yourselves.
And that comes a little bit also to the taking responsibility for your journey. Sometimes I've got this great, legal expert, financial expert, whoever it is, and they toss it over the fence, and now it's the expert's responsibility. And that's not the way it works. It is yours still. But
Yes.
Doing it the way that you've described, I can say when you go to court in Illinois, or if you have to in other states, that it's a completely different experience going in front of that judge, because it's really affirming everything and putting it into place, as opposed to kind of the battle that would happen from the beginning if you went through litigation as well.
Yes. It can be a beautiful day. That prove up hearing, it can, and that's what I coach my clients. I mean, everything is the way you're looking at it, and if you're looking at, like you as a financial expert talking about, in a couple, there's one person who usually is in charge of that. And that's very true, and for the person who isn't, I always coach that person. How exciting for you, how exciting for you now that you get to learn all these new things and you get to be empowered in your life experience of having an understanding of your finances and knowing what you have coming in and what needs to go out. And it's the same for that prove up day. Some people can look at that day and be like, oh, this is so awful. This is the saddest day of my life. And I'm not trying to discount the sadness. I mean, I went through my own divorce. It's brutal, it is brutal. But when you get to that prove up hearing, you can shift the way you're looking at it, and look at it like, okay, you know what? Especially using mediation, we did this together. Let's give ourselves a pat on the back. We have children. We're going to be co-parenting forever. And this is a finality of all the work that we've done. And now we get to start our new life experience and really create what we want.
And I love that you said that, because too often we fight so hard and sometimes dirty to get what we want right now, but we forget that this is the first chapter in the rest of our lives, not the last chapter in this part. So as you said, we're going to have to co-parent for the rest of our lives with this other person. You know what? That's a very important piece, because
yes, it is.
How you treat them and how the divorce goes sets the tone for after the divorce as well. Now, maybe it changes years down the road, but it's a shaky way to go into this new dynamic. And as you said, really at this point, when it comes to children, we should be looking at their best interest. This is not in their best interest.
No. Kids just want to focus on themselves. They just want to focus on themselves. We don't need them to worry about their parents and how they're doing.
Unfortunately, I have to start wrapping up, but I'm going to ask any last thoughts and how can people get in touch with you?
So they can get in touch with me. Phone number 708-222-7335, or our Solace website, solacedivorce.com, or you can email my assistant, admin@solacedivorce.com. Final thoughts is I'm sending love to all of your listeners that are going through any phase of the divorce journey, whether they're just starting to think about it or, maybe they're in litigation. And I'm sending them so much love, and hopefully from hearing this, and Hirsch, the work that you're doing is so important. Hopefully they are inspired to at least look into mediation to see if it's going to be a good fit for them, and really take control of their divorce journey and use those tools then to take control of their whole life. That'd be amazing.
I do appreciate it. It is a wonderful learning experience when you take control in a way that you haven't had before for years. So I want to appreciate all the insights that you've given. I I love your energy. You know that. You
I
always
love your
bring a
energy
beautiful
too.
energy to everything. So that is wonderful. I do encourage everyone, please do reach out to Jen. You can reach at solacedivorce.com. Is maybe the quickest, easiest way to get there. That's her website. After all, you kind of only get one chance to do this. I am Hirsch Serman, your host for the Financial Wellness Hour on WGSN-DB Going Solo Network. Please reach out to me through my website, lifecycle.financial. That is lifecycle.financial. Please reach out to me or to Jen, our guest today. And I want to thank CC Schatz, as always, for putting on such wonderful, make it easy is the bottom line. She makes my job easy. I can have a conversation with people I really appreciate, love, and learn from. And that's a wonderful thing to be able to do and bring this to everybody as well. So have a great week, and thank you for joining us.
Thank you, Hirsch.